And back with the Fantasy Football Pay Dirt podcast. It is once again Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here. He is the guru of fantasy football. You got to check out everything that he's doing at the Facebook group Fantasy Football Pay Dirt podcast and our weekly shows, which air on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and over 30 more podcast outlets. And of course, you always get snippets right here on the Pop Culture Cosmos show and our Friday show, the PCC Multiverse as well. But, you know, those full episodes, you get more of them. That's right. You get more wisdom, you get more knowledge, you get more things that are passed down from fantasy owner to fantasy owner. Like from generation to generation.
You get more guru.
You get more bang for your buck. You get more guru for your dollar when you listen to the full episode that plays on the Pop Culture Cosmos. But it is, my good friend, it is Tyler Baker. What's going on, man?
It was kind of ugly. A couple of the high-powered teams, a couple of them put up points for you, but there was just a lot of... Week 5 was just a drudging bog of fantasy, even though we did see another overtime game this week. There's been a lot of overtime games this season. It seems like a little bit more than we've seen in years past.
Well, this leads me to my first question to ask you, and this does affect fantasy football owners because it leaves them kind of scratching their heads on where to turn to next for players that will actually produce points. I know we make a lot about how the defenses are handcuffed in the NFL. I know we talk a lot about the replays and the tackling and where do you tackle, what can you tackle, that it all favors the quarterback and it always favors the offensive side of things. But it's times like these and it's weekends like these that make you think maybe they're not doing enough because defenses are still finding a way to go ahead and prosper in the NFL.
Things always seem to even out. I know Andy Dalton has been really hot this year. He kind of came back down to earth, and you're seeing that from some of these quarterbacks that, you know, they just get on streaks, and then defenses kind of figure out what they like to do, and things always seem to come out in the wash. Tom Brady started out slow. Now he's putting up numbers. I mean, there's certain quarterbacks that, well, let's take Aaron Rodgers, you know, with the knee injury, has been putting up very good numbers. And today, you know, he throws for 400 some yards, a bunch of touchdowns. They don't win the game. And he does it with some no-name receivers. Adams ended up playing today, but then he had a couple of rookies who I have so much trouble pronouncing both of their names. But, you know, things kind of even out. I did get a chance to watch the Kansas City-Jacksonville game today, and I'll tell you, Patrick Mahomes, he might not have put up stellar numbers, but he is playing some of the best football that I've seen. I mean, the kid is absolutely on fire. His arm is unbelievable, and he has so many weapons around him. I mean, Travis Kelce is just a beast. Tyreek Hill, nobody can do what Tyreek Hill does.
But he is human. He is human because today he actually threw to the other team
for the first time.
For the first time, threw 2 interceptions. But at this point in time, he is still the premier player in fantasy football, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, absolutely. If you have him in Dynasty, you are absolutely ecstatic right now. I mean, Mahomes last week played a really good Denver defense. And again, not eye-popping numbers, but just his play on the field was really, really good. They host Jacksonville today. And I mean, Jacksonville's defense is a legitimately really good defense. And he was making really smart plays. Yeah, he had a couple of interceptions, his first of the year. But you see him spreading the ball around. Sammy Watkins was healthy. That was good. But this offense is just very, very potent. And their defense, it looks like they might be putting some things together. Earlier in this season, they were just terrible at tackling, you know, just the fundamentals of tackling. I didn't see a lot of that today. So if they can continue to improve on defense, I think that this is probably the best team in the AFC.
But we won't talk about the many teams that were not so fun to watch this weekend in the NFL because it really was a little bit of a slow time period when it comes to, like I said, a lot of the defenses held firm this weekend. A lot of the offenses seem to lack imagination and variance in their offensive schemes from what I was watching. Just not a lot going on there with a lot of teams. And I could just go from the Raiders to the Cowboys, the Titans, the Bills, the Texans, just on down the list. All these teams that scored in the teens or below, it just really was kind of just disappointing how they went ahead and laid everything out. Because like I said before, the defenses right now are primed to go ahead and be almost kind of handcuffed the way the rules are laid out in the NFL.
Yeah, it's tough, but the players are beginning to adapt. How guys are tackling the quarterback, they're starting to be careful about these things. Now, you will run into some issues, especially in the secondary. And if you saw the Dallas game, sometimes it just happens so quickly downfield that it's hard not to get those, hitting a defensive receiver calls and things like that. It is difficult for defensive players, but they're starting to adjust. The league came out and the referees really set a tone at the beginning of the season. You could see from some of the Clay Matthews calls, they kind of set the tone, and now they're allowing defenses to catch up to what the league wants to see. And, it's all about player safety, and they will adapt. I did see the Steelers game, and we had talked about the Falcons going into Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh's defense seems to be putting some things together. And that's really important for them because that NFC North division is going to be a tough one. And both of these teams needed a win. Steelers pulled it out. And oh my gosh, James Conner, they gave him the ball early and they gave him the ball a lot. And he did a lot of really good things today.
We'll be right back with more of the Fantasy Football Pay Dirt Podcast. Looking for an edge the next time you take on your favorite video game? Then check out Vitabrace High Performance Gamer Wristbands. Packed with the power of fruit seed oil, Vitabrace is clinically proven to help improve performance, giving you a better gaming experience. Head to miraclefruitoil.com and use the promo code MEDIA10 to get $10 off your Vitabrace purchase. Whether you're looking to beat the time on your latest speedrun or are fighting your way to the top on your favorite multiplayer or battle royale, Vitabrace can help you reach your gaming goals. Buy Vitabrace today at miraclefruitoil.com. That's miraclefruitoil.com. Vitabrace. Win with it. Once again, it is Tyler Baker from the Fantasy Football Pay Dirt Podcast. Full episodes are available each and every week. They pop right around the Wednesday mark when it comes to the Fantasy Football Pay Dirt Podcast on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and over 30 different podcast networks. My friend, I just want to ask you something that we don't really focus on too much unless you're laughing at Jared Cook is the tight end position.
It's miserable.
You like laughing at Jared Cook. That always seems to be a good source of conversation for you for various reasons.
Not a fan.
Not a fan, but he's made me a lot of points. I'll tell you that for both my teams. The tight end position seems to be especially barren this year. I know we talked about Travis Kelce. I know we talked about Jared Cook, which is, like I said, not one of your favorites, but still producing at a high level. Where do people need to reach out to when it comes to the tight end position? Because there was only a very small amount of good performances from the tight end position. I know there's Eric Ebron in Indianapolis, but after that, it really gets kind of hard to determine exactly after him, Cook, Kelce, Gronkowski, that there's really not a whole lot to offer after that because there's a lot of disappointments when it comes to the tight end position.
Yeah, and even if you spent that second round pick on Gronkowski, which you had to in a draft, if you were going to get him, maybe he fell to the third. Even he's been kind of pedestrian. He hasn't had those really big games for you. It's really been Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, are just really important parts of that offense. And then in Oakland, Gruden has decided that Jared Cook is this great player that they have to force feed the ball to, and it's working for him.
Well, I don't know if it's working for them because they don't exactly have the most sterling of records at this point.
well, it's working for fantasy purposes. You're right, though. And maybe that's why they're an awful team because they're relying on Jared Cook for their offensive production. But even Eric Ebron, in that game on Thursday, one of the first passes thrown to him, he just drops it, which is what Ebron's been known for. But I mean, poor Andrew Luck just doesn't have anybody to throw to. I mean, without T.Y. Hilton, I mean, Ryan Grant, like there's just a lot of guys on that team that probably shouldn't be out there, but he trusts Ebron. And a lot of times with the quarterback, that's what matters. Does he trust you? And, Ebron's in a good situation until Jack Doyle comes back, which I'm not exactly sure when that'll be. But as far as, finding somebody at the tight end position, good luck. It's tough. I mean, Austin Hooper has been available on a lot of waiver wires. Today, he had a big day. He had a really big day. But I don't know if that production is something that you can really count on. I was high on Vance McDonald, and I picked him up a couple leagues and played him, and he did just about next to nothing today. I think that'll change the next time they play. So there's only a couple of tight ends that are really important parts of their offense. I still have hopes for Hayden Hurst, the rookie there in Baltimore. He did play. I think he only caught one pass, but he did play. He is definitely the best tight end that they have, but they have like 3 or 4 tight ends. We know Flacco likes going to him, going to the tight end position. I know Hayden Hurst is going to pop. I just don't know how much you can play him until we actually see it from him. So if you're at the point where you're kind of streaming tight ends and maybe you have a roster benched, I would take a chance on Hayden Hurst because I think that that's a guy that you can definitely pick up that has a chance to be something reliable from week to week. But other than that, looking at your waiver wire, I mean, good luck. But there's guys like Ben Watson who's going to have a good game for you every once in a while. Maybe Austin Seferian-Jenkins, when he's not dropping touchdowns like you did today, maybe he'll have a good week for you. But if you're talking about steady production, it's miserable right now at tight end.
It is, and there's very few choices that you can go ahead and pick up from the waiver wire. My suggestion is try, and that's also goes for any of the things that I was talking about earlier with the Kansas City Chiefs, is that take a look at some of the less fortunate teams that are out there in your league. Try to pitch a trade if they're active at this point in time, because they may be on the verge of not being so active. This is about the time you should start thinking about trades within your league. And my first suggestion would be to target those less fortunate teams, those teams that are not having the best of records, and trying to go ahead and shore up some small pieces on your starting lineup with some bench pieces you don't utilize that often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, George Kittle would be a good trade target. He's putting up consistent enough numbers that you can play him every week, and I think the potential is there that he can have big weeks. And he's one to think of. And then there's still like the David Njoku, who, if he finds himself, in a rhythm with Mayfield, that, he could be somebody. I wouldn't look for a whole lot coming out of Cincinnati. I mean, there's CJ Uzmanzada or Tyler Kroft, but, we've seen these guys in this offense before. I think CJ, he has a better shot than Kroft. But like I said last week, I think Tyler Boyd more fills that void. But, there's just not a lot out there in Pittsburgh. I do like Vance McDonald over Jesse James, but we saw today that Jesse James is still going to get looks. I don't trust anything that's going on in New York as far as the Giants are concerned until Evan Ingram comes back. Hey, this is a risky pickup, but Greg Olsen, he's been at practice. I don't know when he's going to play. They're kind of eyeing week 7, but that is a really risky proposition because he missed a lot of last year with a foot injury. He comes in week 1, hurts the same foot. So even if you get him, even if he plays, there's a really high injury risk there. But as we saw, Devin Funchess is just not a good receiver. And Cam Newton, if he gets that big target that he trusts, he's going to use them. Cam likes the bigger targets. He likes to throw it high to the big targets. So maybe take a chance on Greg Olsen, but again, it's going to be risky because who knows how long that foot's going to last for him. But other than that, there's some guys like Ricky Seals-Jones in Arizona. If he can develop that rapport with Rosen, maybe we'll get something out of him. But I do like that Christian Kirk, Josh Rosen thing going on. I think that's only going to continue to grow. And we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. yeah, there's just not a whole lot. I did see that Ryan Griffin there in Houston got quite a few targets. Wasn't overly impressed by what he did with them, and considering the other options that they have there to throw to, I don't know how much he gets involved. Now, Tampa Bay is coming off their bye, and Jameis Winston has shown in the past that he prefers Cameron Brate over O.J. Howard. O.J. Howard, I think, is still injured. I don't know if he'll come back after their bye. So, maybe Cameron Brate's out there. But yeah, the tight end position is it's just not a good one this year.
One last thing I want to touch on before I'll leave final thoughts for you, my friend. And that is the situation with wide receivers getting hurt this weekend in the NFL. And it really has to start with what most consider is the best team in the NFL, including both you and I, the Los Angeles Rams. They had some injuries. They have some I guess, some nicks in the armor there that happened this weekend with some injuries to some key receivers.
Yeah, Brandon Cooks, who I have in a lot of leagues because he was so undervalued going into the draft. So I have him on quite a few teams. He ended up leaving without a catch. Took a really hard hit in the second quarter, didn't come back. Cooper Kupp also went into the concussion protocol. I would assume both of those guys are back next week, but we'll just have to see how the practice reports go. Matt Breida, running back for the San Francisco 49ers, he had an ankle injury that looked kind of bad. They had some x-rays on it. X-rays were negative. It's an ankle sprain. He might miss a week or two, but we're still going to wait and hear for that.
Unless it's a high ankle sprain, and that could last almost the rest of the season.
Yeah, which I haven't seen anything yet about what that injury entails. I do know that Corey Grant, running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars, he's done for the year. He has a Lisfranc injury, and they are going to put him on IR. He's done. So until Leonard Fournette comes back, TJ Yeldon is going to get a lot of work, and he got a lot of work today, and he looked pretty good. TJ Yeldon looked good today. So I would expect TJ Yeldon to continue a premier role in that offense for as long as Fournette is gone. Kerryon Johnson got banged up in this game, running back for the Detroit Lions. This doesn't look serious, and they have a bye next week. So by the time they get off the bye, he should be good to go. And then those Green Bay receivers, we'll have to see what happens with them. Randall Cobb's injury is what they're calling week to week, so I wouldn't expect him back next week, but I think they'll probably get Geronimo Allison back. Aaron Rodgers showing that even throwing to no-name guys, he's still going to put up 400-some yards.
We'll be right back with more of the Fantasy Football Pay Dirt Podcast. Check out what's been going on with the Pop Culture Cosmos Show and the PCC Multiverse.
That is by far my favorite because it's also character driven and the stakes are high and there's much more of a mystery and intrigue to it.
A game like Wolfenstein, which people are saying are one of the most socially important video games of the past 10 years.
Catch our shows on radio worldwide 7 days a week or at any time on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on over 30 more podcast outlets. Once again, it is Tyler Baker from the Fantasy Football Pay Dirt Podcast. You got to catch his great podcast each and every week. The full episodes are now available each and every week on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and so many other various podcast outlets. Any last thoughts, my friend, on the way out?
Well, it's like I mentioned earlier, it's nice to see Pittsburgh, that defense starting to come together. That will be really important because they're going to need to win some games in order to be relevant in the playoff picture. Atlanta losing, as good as that offense is, it's just a shame how that defense has been decimated by injuries, and they're at the bottom of the NFC South. It's just hard to see. Denver, we could see some changes in Denver, some coaching changes with Vance Joseph there in Denver. They are really underperforming. John Elway's not the type of person that's going to keep putting up with this. We could even see a change at quarterback from Case Keenum. Denver, for as good as their defense is, they just need to get more out of their offense. So we could see some changes this week. There's already been rumblings of that, so stay tuned to see what happens there. I did watch the Giants, and Eli Manning is absolutely awful. Odell Beckham is emotionally breaking down again. So there's trouble. But what they do have is Saquon Barkley, and he is so good. He just kind of drudged along, running really well, but not doing a lot on the stat sheet for a while. And then you just give him the ball that one play, and he is gone. In fact, Odell Beckham threw him a pass. I forget how long the pass went for, but it was the longest pass of the Giants season for 57 yards, and it was thrown by Odell Beckham Jr. to Saquon Barkley. So the poor Giants, and we talked about this with Chris last week, Eli Manning just doesn't look like the Eli Manning that we've seen in the past. So until they get that quarterback situation figured out, I would not expect too much from them. It was cool to see that the Buffalo Bills got a win, and the Bills have this way of doing enough on defense to slow down the opposing offense, and somehow Josh Allen and the rest of them managed to pull wins out. So the unlikely Buffalo Bills are actually a relevant football team, which is pretty interesting.
It is, and
and the Cleveland Browns picked up a win. So the Cleveland Browns are 2-1. Can you believe it?
Well, I gotta tell you what. If you would have told me that the Cleveland Browns right now, after Week 5 in the NFL, is fighting for a playoff spot, I would have said you would have been smoking something, and I'm not sure it would be entirely legal. So it is something to see. I'm very happy for the fans of Cleveland to see that their team is actually very competitive. Whether or not that pans out for a playoff spot, we'll have to wait and see. But it's good to see them at least winning games, being involved in that. There's no blowouts lately. Mm-hmm. They look like a team that actually can compete with even the better teams in the NFL. So that's good to see. Glad to see some of that parity going on.
Yeah, and even the games that they're losing, they're still in those games. So
that's true. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's funny that we're that we're glowing about a 500 Cleveland Browns team, but at the NFL at this stage, 500 is still very much in the hunt.
That's true, and can't wait to see what the rest of the season looks like for them. Baker Mayfield looks like he's the real deal and has provided a very great lift for them and the city as well. So it looks like it's going to be some good times, at least some very competitive times for the Cleveland Browns going forward.
Yeah, and Nick Chubb got his 3 carries again today. Hugh Jackson showing that Carlos Hyde is their bell cow, and that's the guy that they want to go to. But I would expect Chubb to slowly get a bigger piece of that offense. But I just have the sneaky feeling that the Browns are going to continue to load their team with talent and get it to the point where it's just ready to take off. And then they're going to fire Hugh Jackson and bring somebody else in that can actually use the talent and say, hey, thanks, Hugh Jackson, but, we want to win more games. So I got a sneaky feeling that that's going to happen.
And that would be a shame because he was there for all that pain, and to not end up trying to see through that all that glory that they hopefully will go through is going to be a disappointment then, indeed. So
yeah,
that's just a shame. But like I said, it could happen. And if that's the case, and they only see mediocrity and they have a stacked roster, then that's obviously going to be the next thing that they're going to look at taking place.
Yeah. And hopefully Njoku, he did have 11 targets, 6 for 69. So, talking about, tight end and starting to get more, maybe he's got this thing with Mayfield that is going to continue to build. So if you got Njoku, just from a talent standpoint, maybe that's a viable tight end play.
My friend, on our Friday show, the PCC Multiverse, when you come back with some late hits that you need to know about just before week 6 in the NFL, I want to make sure and ask you about some good trade targets that are out there, because this is around the time that teams are starting to think about how they want to fill out their rosters for the rest of the season. And the waiver wire is becoming thinner and thinner and thinner. Active fantasy football owners are going to start targeting trades and start targeting those rosters. Like I was saying, though, they may target the less successful ones first because they may be able to get a trade better established than maybe with a winning owner or someone that's very active in the league. But on Friday's show, the PCC Multiverse, I would really like your thoughts on maybe about 3 or 4 trade targets that fantasy football owners need to go to and think about as far as for their next fantasy football trade, because that's something that when it happens like in a flurry, about 3 or 4 trades going through, and then everybody gets clammed up and bottled up for the rest of the season. So
Sure. And it's a good time to look at it because week 6, you have the Lions and the Saints going on by. There's a lot of fantasy value in those two teams. But starting in week 7, you have 4 teams going on by. Week 7 and 8, you have 4 teams. And then in week 9, you have 5 teams on by. And so if you can find a trade partner who's maybe has some players coming that their buys are coming up and they're going to run into some difficulties there, it's a good time to say, hey, you give me this guy, I'll give you this guy, and he'll help you through the bye week. So there's a lot of opportunity for trades in the coming weeks. Yeah, so Friday will pinpoint that.
Absolutely. That's looking forward to that. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on exactly who people need to target with their next fantasy football trade. So Tyler, my friend, it's been a great episode. If you have any questions for Tyler, you can always email us at popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. But also a great place to go is the Facebook group, Fantasy Football Pay Dirt Podcast. Tyler's there with over 200 other fantasy football fans that are out there. You throw out your trade requests, you throw out waiver wire requests, lineup changes, anything that suggestions or questions that you might have there, or you can also direct message him and share your thoughts and ask him for his insight on all those trades and transactions that you might want to keep a secret because there might be prying eyes around. Almost like that Hall & Oates song, private eyes are watching you. Okay, sorry. Anyways, they see your every move. Only out of Pop Culture Cosmos can you get me singing Private Eyes.
Yeah. And hey, if you want to direct message me, that's cool. Nobody will know but me, you, and the NSA.
No comment. I know we're being watched right now. I've got a cam on. You know they're watching me. But Tyler, it's always great having you on the show, my friend. Always great for you passing on that knowledge as the man behind the Fantasy Football Pay Dirt Podcast. Thank you so much, Tyler, for being a part of the show, part of the Pop Culture Cosmos, and of course, right here on the Fantasy Football Pay Dirt Podcast.